My name is Maggie Hammond. I'm a senior lecturer in construction law at London South Bank University. I'm a solicitor, and because I teach construction law, which is one of the STEM subjects at London South Bank University, I've volunteered or been volunteered to be your chair for this evening. I just wanted to introduce you first to the series of events that are taking place. It's part of London South Bank University celebrating women in engineering, which we've been teaching since for the last 100 years, starting with Ida Bould in 1921. Lsbu has been the home of amazing female engineers, starting their education and professional training with us. Through the discussions in the series of talks that we're launching through South Bank University, we hope to identify what needs to be done to encourage more women and girls to take up STEM subjects and to choose a career in engineering specifically in this 21st century. I was looking at a very inspirational speaker called Naomi McGregor, whose background is engineering, promoting women engineering, and interesting enough is also a ballet teacher. She talked about what held her back as being the fear of failure, fear of judgment of others, specifically men. It was largely men in the university where she was taught and men that she worked with. And she looked back at her positive experiences of resilience and her positive experiences of success. And she took those experiences from her work as a ballet teacher and as learning ballet as a young woman. So she looked at what she called her girly or soft skills, the creative parts of her, to find what she called her authentic self and to succeed as one of very few women in engineering at the time. As I'm a lawyer, I'm going to do a little lawyer quote before I introduce our speakers. So I'd like to quote Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who we've all heard of recently, who was one of the Supreme Court justices in the United States of America. To paraphrase her, she said that women belong where decisions are being made, not as an exception, and women should not always be required to be exceptional. So the event this evening is about choose to challenge, and we'd like to focus on asking the world, asking our audience today to challenge the status quo about engineering not being a profession for women, and specifically looking at the variety of careers that the women speakers today have chosen to go into. So I'd like to start with Dr. Jasmine Pradisito, sorry, I beg your pardon, Pradisito, who's going to talk to us about creativity in art and STEM, turning STEM into STEAM and using creativity as part of her career in engineering. Jasmine, do you want to put your slides up if you want to unmute yourself?
Oh, thank you. I thought we were going to introduce everybody, but no, we're going to do one at a time. Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for attending. It's an absolute pleasure to have been asked to contribute to this. I will share my slides in a moment. Yeah, it's a little bit, I guess, although I did do my PhD at UCL in the Department of Electrical and Electronic Engineering, it was very much in physics, and I was studying art at the same time. But let me share my screen. Oh gosh, where's it gone? I did just have it. And now I've lost it. Where's my presentation gone? Oh dearie me. Dean, can you help? I don't know where it's gone.
Do you want me to share on my side?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you. Let me see. Does that come? Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Dean. Can I do an F5? Yes, we can do an F5 on that. Yes, so this is me. Artist, scientist, environmentalist, and academic. So I did my very first degree at Lsbu, for which I have a huge affection for Lsbu. In terms of it giving people a chance who haven't necessarily done everything in the way that people are expected to do things. And then, as I say, I went on to UCL, but I was not a natural scientist nor stroke engineer because I had always wanted to do art. But invariably, especially coming from a family of immigrants who had to, struggle very hard to be here, there was no option of doing art. I had to go and do something sensible, which ended up being the sciences. But I was always studying art. And as time has progressed, I also spent 20 years working with children, teaching. I have worked with the engineering club on something called Creative Engineers Can Change the World. I've done some work at the Institute of Civil Engineers, and I also teach undergraduate engineers as well. And for me, I very much specialize in divergent thinking, because with engineering, of course, usually you need to converge on a solution that works, and I completely understand that. But innovation comes from that divergency at the beginning. And this is why I think art is so incredibly important and should be part of STEM. The Royal Academy of Engineers, I know, have been screaming for more creative engineers. And what I love about this in particular is that it means that you can bring the things that you love doing into your work. They don't need to be parked at the door. And ultimately, I guess now I've kind of moved beyond just the art and the science and the engineering to how can I use this to create real change. That to me is the biggest challenge, although obviously there are various challenges as being a female. I mean, I have always worked in a very male-intensive environment. But actually it's quite different in art. There are so many things I've had to come across, whether it be female or being a mother or being a woman of a particular age, or when I was doing science and art, although now we very much accept that we can be cross-curricular, that we can be a polymath. When I was doing the art, I was doing it in secret. We don't choose to kind of challenge, we don't choose to be wrong. I mean, I didn't, it snuck up on me, and I realized that I had sort of paved the way in some ways, and that's a real privilege. But for me, ultimately, everything that we're doing now, whether we do it in art or science or engineering, is to create a better future, one in which we can sort of create clean air, clean water, regardless of how incredibly smart we are. Dean, could I have the next slide, please? Regardless of how incredibly smart we are entering a new age. So if you think of the revolutions that we've had, from agriculture to industrial to information, we are now entering what I and many other people believe is the Conceptual Revolution. And it's a revolution of thought, in which things like high concept, high touch, by which I mean the things that make us most human, storytelling, connection making, empathy, play. These are the things that are going to distinguish us in an era in which where machines can do an awful lot of the more mundane jobs. And I actually think that's rather brilliant. I can't imagine anyone would want to spend their entire life working in a factory or on a conveyor belt. Of course, I am fairly idealistic. That's why I'm an artist. But I like to imagine that we can all get the opportunity to do the things that we are best at. And I take this wonderful quote, which comes from a naturalist and a philosopher called E.O. Forster, who said, "We are effectively Paleolithic creatures, and we have medieval institutions, which you see every Wednesday, usually during Prime Minister's question time, and we possess godlike technology." This is something that we all need to think about, and we need to discuss a great deal more. It's all very well doing something, but we need to question why we're doing it. And the future, again, is much more about meaning, not just meaning as an individual, but obviously meaning as a collaborative sort of unit. And one of the things I have experienced, and I'm experiencing it more and more, is that there is a growing momentum of people wanting to change. And I mean, I've worked with a lot of engineers, a lot of scientists, a lot of other artists, but invariably we do things on a shoestring. But this idea of trying to change things, it kind of mobilizes people. It gets people doing things. Can I have the next slide, please, Dean? So just to give you a little example of what I've sort of been doing. So yeah, it's quite, I guess, again, the challenge. This challenge is, especially, I guess, as a woman. When my son was 4.5 years old, I realized that I had only understood the language of science. If I wanted to break into the art world, I needed to understand the language of art. And so I went back to art college, and for the first 2 years, I kept my background, my PhD, I kept it all incredibly secret because I was there to learn. I was more qualified than a lot of my lecturers, and I wasn't there to make a point, I was there to learn. But 2 years in, and the reason I kind of mention this story is sometimes we only need one person or maybe a couple throughout our lifetime that really inspire us to take a risk. And his name was David Skingle, and he's passed away now, bless him. But he came into the room one day, and he kind of gave me this book called, what was it, The Zen of Motorcycle Maintenance. I said, "What are you giving me this for?" And he said, "I've just found out, your background, your PhD." Blah, blah. He said, "Why on earth are you painting the things that you're painting? Not that they're not good, Jasmine, but you've got this huge wealth of knowledge." Now, I was a mother. I was running my own business. I was going to art college. I was managing, honestly, I don't know how many different things. And I still remember saying out loud, "Oh my goodness, am I allowed to do that?" Right? And that phrase never stops going through my head. Am I allowed to do that? Because it had never occurred to me that I could use all the other subjects that I enjoyed, all the other things that interested me, and that actually they might make me a better artist or a better scientist or a better engineer. And that completely changed my practice. I then started building machines. I started using my physics. So the two hands at the bottom, which are called to pin a butterfly, which are very much inspired by the fact that we are pinned as individuals, but it's made out of discarded plastic and polarized light. Rewilding is the piece on the left, and I'm going to mention that a little bit more in a minute, because that has only been able to happen as a group of scientists and engineers and artists getting together, but it's made out of a material that absorbs nitrogen dioxide from the air. This became incredibly personal for me 5 years ago, and this is the other thing that I've really started to understand now, that in order to create change, sometimes it has to get personal. And my son, at the age of 18 then, had a massive asthma attack, which I'd never experienced before. And sitting in A&E one night, I think it was 2 o'clock in the morning, I really started to think about the nature of the breath. And invariably, synchronicity being what it is, when your mind opens up to things, opportunities present themselves. And there was a commission, which I'm going to mention in a moment. But rewilding is not simply about clean air for us. It's also about clean air for the tiniest insects, for green things, for grasses. If we have too much nitrogen in the soil, the big bully boys of nettles and cowslips grow instead of the meadow flowers that can pollinate the bees and the butterflies. And if you think of every 1 out of every 3 mouthfuls of food is because of bees, we need to protect our our biodiversity. And then I've also been exploring cyanotypes, and I got that idea from engineering blueprints. I started to become very interested in how engineering blueprints were created, and they are simply a UV sensitive. So there's a UV sensitive coating put onto paper, and whatever's in the way will actually create a line. So again, sorry, Dean, can I have the next one, please? With art, I think also the incredibly important thing about art is it does teach us to take risks. It teaches us to connect metaphors. It teaches us to tell stories. I've worked with a few engineering firms now, some incredibly brilliant, very clever people, but could not communicate what it is that they were doing, or they could communicate it in a very technical way, which if you're going into a room and asking for funding, doesn't always communicate itself. And having watched engineers work, people like myself, the fact that they can then develop their narrative, their story, and it's not simply as an engineer, it's also as a woman, for example, of any age, attempting to reinvent herself. How do you create a new narrative? And so this particular piece, Breathe, I guess, was the start of this narrative to do with cleaning the air, to reducing pollution. So it's a figure looking up to the air. I'm not entirely certain if she's taking a breath or she's being smothered, but she was inspired by the mythopoeia of the past. So mythopoeia are ancient stories. If you think of The Lord of the Rings, you think of C.S. Lewis and the Narnia stories. They were all fascinated by our past traditions and our past history so that they could create future stories. And I guess that's what my work is about. I am using very traditional techniques, but also combining them with very contemporary techniques such as 3D printing and such. But Breathe is actually, I'm very proud to say, after many, many delays, she's going up next month in April. And the idea is, this was actually created before the Breathe program with the Mayor of London. But the idea is to take people off the second most polluted road in the country, Euston, and to lead them down greener walkways so that they might put away their phone, so that they could kind of, you know, perhaps, well, it's more well-being, it's a little bit more sort of meditative as they go. This would not have happened without engineers, scientists, artists all working together. And it shows, I mean, obviously we can't clean all of London air, but what it's demonstrating through art in a way that data can't, because I tend to think that data and science have failed us a lot. And I've had conversations with people about this. But art in many ways can make you stop. Whether you like it or dislike it is actually irrelevant, as long as it stops you in your tracks, even for a moment. Next slide, Dean, please. And this other piece, if you're ever in South London and you go past the Horniman, we installed this last summer, which was, again, quite an undertaking during lockdown. I learned a great deal about working during the pandemic. I finished this in the garden with my son, but this is called Flower Girl, who will awaken upon the buzzing of the bees. So when we put this in the ground, there were no plants. When I returned a few weeks later and they showed me the planting that was all designed to attract pollinating plants, I think I almost cried, because that vision, I really understood the power then of sculpture in terms of it being in the right local environment. We've had a lot of press from this, a lot of attention, people starting to understand that materials. So for example, this material, Noxtec, was designed by a set of engineers and scientists as an insulator. It can be heated to 2000 degrees. It's incredibly inert. It's incredibly hard. When I went to speak to them, it had never been used as a sculpting material. And I kind of said to them, listen, guys, perhaps I can get you the PR, I can get you the media attention for what you're doing, but using art. And because they were sufficiently open-minded and you know, open to a different perspective, we could do that. And it is working. We're hoping to take some of the work to Venice next year. And there are lots of really sort of exciting things just sort of in the making. Next slide, please, Dean. So just before I finish up, I guess it's taken me 20 years to come up with this equation. And I remember when I started thinking about creative thinking about 10, 15 years ago, there were two books. There were two books on the subject. Now there are a myriad of books. And whether it's innovation through corporation or whether it's reinventing yourself, I really don't see these things as different. To me, they are one and the same. Innovation doesn't happen between 10 and 12 on a Tuesday. Neither does changing how people see you as a woman, or you know, as any sort of group. This is something that's ongoing, and it's part and parcel of your thinking. And I now really believe that in order to create that innovation, change, transformation, whatever it is that you want to call it, it happens from creative thinking. And for me, creative thinking is not just purely paradigm shifting creative thinking. So if you think of the apple, if you think of relativity, these were massive paradigm shifting acts of creativity. But they happen, they kind of, if they conglomerate, they happen from everyday small acts of creative thinking or medium-sized creative acts within your profession. And I've learned that from working with children for 20 years, because until about the age of 7, I remember there was some NASA research that said until about the age of 7, 98% of kids are genius in their divergent thinking. By the time they reach adulthood, it's gone down to 2%. So somewhere in the education system, we are boxing ourselves in. Now, if you can add that to connection making, and this is where I think university and knowledge gathering, if you like, is so important. If you can start making connections between seemingly unrelated things and put that together with the creativity, the risk-taking, the playing, that's where you start to kind of look at the world in an entirely new way. And this again is where art is so important. If you think in America, they are using artists to teach Harvard medical students, for example, not just how to look at paintings, but the fact that if you can look at a picture, you can actually read a person much better. By using these skills, and as I say, not just within your work, but with yourself, with your own narrative, you can either transform or you can create a piece of innovation in your work. And just to sort of finish up, thank you, Dean. If you're interested in sort of, art as well as engineering, at the moment, I'm part of a group show alongside some amazing women like Tracy Emin and Bridget Riley with the gallery that started representing me called Gillian Jason Gallery. They are a gallery that exclusively represent women and have a real vision for how we can get our voices more heard, but it's called Heart of the Matter. It speaks a great deal about this. You can also find me on Instagram, but yeah, it's not just the engineering side, it's looking at the art side, and I'd be delighted. It's obviously a virtual exhibition at the moment, but I'd be delighted if some of you could go and have a look. So thank you very much for that, Maggie.
Thank you. And Tracy Emin, I think, was at London Met, wasn't she? Didn't she train at the Cass Institute at the London Met?
Yeah, I was actually at London Met, but I didn't know that until you said that out loud. So thank you. I've just learned something new.
You've got something in common next time you see her. Thank you very much, Jasmine. That was great.
My pleasure.
We're going to take questions at the end. So if we can just move into our next speaker, who I'm now going to introduce. I'm sorry, Jasmine, I didn't introduce you properly. So I'm going to introduce Sola Ajani, who's a process engineer, which I had to ask what that was. So she's going to explain that to us when she starts speaking. She's the co-founder of Black Women in Engineering Network, which is great. She got a first-class honours degree in chemical engineering from London South Bank University, congratulations, in 2015, and completed her master's degree in chemical and process engineering at UCL, another UCL graduate, in 2016. She works in the food industry at the moment, which we had lots of discussions earlier, didn't we, about different products that the company you work for make. So, so if I could hand over to Sola, thank you.
Hello. So I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully you should be able to see my screen now.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right. Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much, Maggie, for that really nice and warm introduction. My name is Abby, and yes, I'm a process engineer, and I currently work at ADM. Which is Archdaniels Midlands, and I'm also the co-founder for BWENG. So I'm really honoured to be on the panel today to, I guess, talk about my experience in engineering. So I'll take it back, and I know that it's very bland, you've just got engineering in front of you, but in the spirit of the event and the series that Lsbu is doing, I wanted to kind of bring it back home as to what's engineering, and how does engineering, has such a vast reach that it's basically touching everybody's life, every aspect of life as you think about it. And when I remember when I wanted to, I guess, study, go to university to study, and I was thinking about what do I want to do, what do I enjoy, what's going to be, I guess, a profession that's fairly well paid, and I'm going to enjoy what I'm doing. And I remember liking the maths and the sciences and having this conversation with my dad, and I thought, okay, maybe fashion designing. And that wasn't well received by my parents, because I thought, oh, why would you do fashion designing when you enjoy, like the STEM subjects? Why don't you look into engineering and think about, what are the kind of engineering that you could potentially do? And being me, I went in there and I looked. I remember going on to Why Not Chem Eng, and I kind of saw what chemical engineering was, and thought, oh, engineering is great, because engineering is basically, to me, is being able to make things work, being able to create things, build them, design them, and maintain them, and then do it all over again, but make it better next time. So I just enjoyed, the aspects of what I could potentially get with an engineering career, and that's why I went into engineering. But when you think about engineering, you don't necessarily always think about women. Most of the time, I've been in events when I've asked people, engineering, what do you think about, words of association? The first thing that comes to your mind. And I've had so many people, I don't remember how much, just tell me, oh yeah, you're thinking about a man in a suit with a suitcase, or someone in construction somewhere, putting bricks together, building houses. And I thought, that's really, really good. But that's a very, very ancient way of seeing engineering, because engineering is a lot more diverse now. And yeah, so things has kind of evolved as we've gone along. So I'll take you guys on a very short journey of my engineering career, and it all started with my A levels, I guess, because to be able to study chemical engineering back in the days when I was young, I needed to study maths and sciences. So I went on to do A levels in maths, psychology, and interestingly enough, I did biology A levels, which I didn't really get a very good grade at. So I went on to do a BTEC, combined sciences, which was really, really interesting, and I enjoyed it. So then after that, I went in to study chemical and process engineering at South Bank, and I opted to do a year work placement within my course, and I loved it. It was amazing. I think what made it even better for me was having studied, chemical engineering and learning all about the theories of designing equipments and process equipments that's used in industry. Being in the industry and seeing these equipments that I've designed as part of my modules at university was so interesting. I remember when I was in uni, I designed a heat exchanger, and it was so massive. And I thought, how can you have a heat exchanger so big? But then when I went into my placement year, and I saw heat exchangers that were even bigger than the ones I designed, I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You can't really comprehend this kind of things unless you're thinking about it and you're in it. So I enjoyed my year's placement. I worked as a facilities engineer in an oil and gas company called Chevron. And that literally put me in a different frame of mind to finish my degree and then go and to pursue an engineering career. But before I did that, I thought, oh, why not finish it off with another master's in chemical engineering? I did that at UCL, and after which I got a job as a run plant / production engineer at Dow AgriSciences. And now that company is known as Corteva. But it was really, really good insight into, I guess, the adult world, into the professional world of engineering. And as a production engineer, I was in charge of a department that produced insecticides and fungicides. So we had the water-based insecticides and solvent-based insecticides, and it was really eye-opening for me to see how so many different aspects of things all feeds into engineering and into manufacturing. Because as a production engineer, I was liaising with the quality department, because we needed to make sure that whatever product we were making was in spec and customers would buy it, and also make sure that we were doing things safely. We were, carrying out work safely. If we were installing equipment, we were doing that safely, making sure that everybody got home the way they came in, which is, not being hurt, no accidents and no issues at all. And then I did that for about 11 months. And then I went on to working as a process engineer at ADM, which is where I currently work at the moment. And it's an amazing job. In my role, I get to literally make oil that people use in their cooking. McDonald's use in their making fries, and, and the options and the opportunities is endless. And in my role as a process engineer now, it's so diverse, because I get to not only liaise with all the other different environments, but all the other different departments within the company, but I also get to, you know, see how my job, my role, and the processes that I look after affect the environment when it comes to emission. Also affects like process safety, because we work with some fairly hazardous equipment and components on the plant. And yeah, so it's been very interesting. It's been very hands-on, and I get to be as innovative as I can be when it comes to problem solving. And I've enjoyed the journey so far. Now, where am I going to go in the future? I don't know yet, but there are lots of different areas within engineering that I think I'll definitely like to go into, like process safety, project management, and then the opportunities endless. So these, you know, for this year's International Women's Engineering, International Women's Day, we were choosing to challenge something, and I chose to challenge the representation of women in engineering, because it's needed. So in the images and pictures that I've shown here, that's me working as part of my placement year when I was still studying at London South Bank, and I worked in the gas production and gas processing plant. It was really, really good fun. Like I said, I got to see life-size equipment that I didn't know about, or I had an idea about, but I didn't quite know how it all kind of came together in a actual process. And on the right is me at ADM. And yes, so I'm choosing to be the representation that I would like to see in the engineering workforce. And so with that, I hope that the future of engineering will be kind of like what we've got up on the screen here, a lot more diverse, with lots of, you know, lots of women and men doing so many different kind of engineering jobs, because the opportunities are endless, and the future is bright because a lot of people know about Industry 4.0, which is where I guess, which is the new world we're living in, and how things are going to be run. It's going to be a lot more data driven and a lot more automated. So the opportunities, you know, of an engineering career that's not very similar to what you think an engineering career would be like is ridiculous. And yes, so that brings me to the end of my.
Thank you very much. Great. So as I said, we'll take questions at the end. So can I now introduce Alirda Dramisi, who's a civil engineer with South Bank University at the moment. She's studying, so she's taking some time out from her postgraduate studies. She studied in Italy and came to South Bank University to undertake her first degree in civil engineering. She got a first class degree in 2019. Well done. And she's now undertaking a postgraduate course in civil engineering and integrated design. So, and you have got any slides for us. You're just going to talk to us for
yes,
15 minutes or so.
So
Great.
yeah, yes, thank you for introducing Maggie. As Maggie was saying, I am civil engineer, so it's quite different from the path that Jasmine or Abby undertook. My path has been quite filled with ups and downs. And also I didn't brought some slides today because I wanted this more to be like an open discussion for later the questions that might come. So at the beginning, how did I choose to go into engineering was quite not straightforward. When I was a child, I wanted actually to be a vet or doctor. And then I realized that I wouldn't really take well working in hospitals, but I still was looking for something that would help people. And at the same time, I was good at maths and sciences. So I knew that had something to do with those type of subjects. However, I was not aware of engineering as a field. It was not on my radar at all. Until when my high school teachers in Italy, because I grew up in Italy, suggested me, how about looking into engineering? So I started looking at the different engineering paths that were kind of offered to us at different career fairs. And I was attracted to civil engineering because it has to do with buildings and creating something that impacts other people's lives and that stays forever. And also I had a kind of influence because my dad worked in construction. So I was kind of breathing already what I was going into, but I wasn't aware that there was this field available for women as well. So when I went to those career fairs, an entire world opened up. I went on to study a course of mixed building engineering and architecture while I was in Italy, just because I wasn't sure if I was more interested in architecture or civil engineering. The course was harder because it was kind of having 2 degrees merged together. And during that course, I really enjoyed the maths part, and I started not liking so much the drawing and creative part of it. So it kind of was kind of alarmed towards more the engineering side rather than the architecture side. And once I moved to UK, it was even more clear. So before starting university at London Southbank University, I did a work experience, which anyone interested in civil engineering or any type of engineering, I would advise to do. Any kind of work experiences you can do even before university, just so you can have an idea before you actually get into the field. And it was great because I got to learn a lot about different types of departments within civil engineering, because it's a very broad field. You can go into project management rather than designing, or different areas of engineering. And this was another point that really attracted me. And that kind of gave me more clarity and confirmation even more. However, I also experienced some doubts. That didn't stop me. I still went on and did my degree. But I kind of understood that it's not the most obvious thing for people to see women in engineering. So I studied at Southbank University, where I really enjoyed my degree. Throughout my studies at London Southbank University, I also had way to have internship, which was more hands-on, was in a steel production workshop, and I got to design frames and see them installed in a matter of days. And that really showed me what I was creating, because a lot of time we feel like we are creating something that is quite abstract, but then engineering gives you this aspect of being concrete, and you can see it in a matter of days, months, or whichever is going to be the process. So after understanding this and confirming that this is what I wanted to do, I still faced doubt. And that was more generational doubt. I understood that my grandparents, for example, they weren't understanding how a girl can work in engineering. I had to explain that because my grandparents really, for a long time, felt like I was an architect, which is quite different. We work together a lot, but it's quite different. And in a sense, I still believe that there is work to be done, but I am happy of what I choose, because it gives me an opportunity to show to other people that have those doubts that we as women can do it. And also that a lot of our skills as women are very appreciated in the field. I found a lot of times my work was really appreciated rather than maybe some other point of views that were more obvious to males in the office or in this sense. So I'm currently now, as Maggie was mentioning, studying at UCL. I'm about to conclude my master, and I decided to have, again, a change of path. So up to now, I've been focusing more in the design part of it. All my experience so far, as short as it is, has been in design. But I decided to go more into project management, and I am currently about to investigate what could be the issues of project management in countries in development, in particular my native country. So all of this was just to say that whichever are the doubts that you would face as a woman in engineering, I would like you to just take your stand and just believe in your skills and believe in your professionalism and your passion, because it is worth it. And that whatever you are willing to do with your future, then just go after it, because I believe that with passion and professionalism, everything else can be overcome. So I don't really have further to add, because my career is just the start. But that was really my message to the women that are looking to go into engineering, just to be passionate and be professional and show that they can do it. And yeah, thanks, Maggie.
That's great. Thank you very much. Good. So, so very different speakers there. We have ladies. Do you want to unmute yourselves and come back so we can see you?
Yes.
There we go. Yeah, so very, very different speakers, very different backgrounds, very different work in engineering or at the start of career of engineering. I wanted to just follow through on a couple of things that were common or sometimes not so common with your talks. Can I ask about self-doubt as a woman? So as women going into engineering, I can see you all starting to smile now. So we have that thing, don't we, as women, the imposter syndrome, we shouldn't be here, and you ladies are going into or in careers where we know that women are traditionally not in those careers, and more important, they're not breaking through into those careers in a way that other professions which were male dominated 100 years ago or so are not. So Jasmine.
Oh goodness, yes, that made me smile. And I've experienced it it's quite interesting actually. Invariably, I think some of the highest achievers are some of the people who doubt themselves the most. Of course, we all know about the Dunning-Kruger effect, you know, but yeah, that imposter thing. And one of the ways I think it gets better with time. And obviously every time you achieve something where you go, oh God, I really don't know how to do that, because let's face it, we all do that. But every time you come through it and you go, well, I've just done something that I didn't think I could do, you get a little bit better. But I also think it's incredibly important to be surrounded by a support network of friends and people that you can rely on, and people that you can, you know, have that late night phone call where you go, I don't know what I'm doing and it's all a bit scary. And they go, it's okay. And you can't do it. For years, I tried to do stuff on my own. I was so stubborn. And once I came in and went, do you know what? I can't. Everything changed. So I think also the more cutting edge, the more innovative you're trying to be, the more you have those conversations. And it's not just women, actually. I've met a lot of very high achieving men, engineers and scientists, who also have the same conversations with themselves. So I don't think it's just a woman thing, but I think the way you get over it is, one, keeping on challenging yourself, and two, having conversation with your peers where you're all honest and go, actually, I'm panicking quietly in the background as well. It's okay.
Okay. Abby, what do you think? Do you think it's a woman thing, or is it a human being thing that we doubt ourselves? Do you think we doubt ourselves differently?
Yes, I think a lot of it has to I think a lot of it definitely has to be a woman thing, because women, we're nurturers, right, by nature. We even if it's not, you know, we don't like to really discuss it, we are raised slightly different to men. And so because of that, you find that, you know, when you go into engineering, I mean, I know that engineering is a male-dominated industry. Statistics shows it. In the UK, there's like 12% of the engineering workforce are women. In America, it's 13%. So the figures are not even, you know, that much better. But when I started working in manufacturing, it was a whole different level of male-dominated industry, because I found myself being the only woman in the room. And when I started working, and as much as I did a placement year, which I think was a very good opportunity for me to, you know, get some level of technical experience. When I started working, I always second guessed myself, and it didn't help that a lot of the men that I was working with didn't really read the room. And so, you know, it's an ego thing, you know, oh yeah, we're talking about doing this, we're going to do this. And then it, you know, it's cultural. They kind of talk over each other sometimes. And there's me, little old girl, just sitting in the corner of the room like, oh, I'm going to wait until everyone stops talking before I say something. But then you kind of just work and you get more experience. You're like, okay, so maybe I'm not necessarily going to interrupt, but I will say my piece, and I will say, you know, I'll say my part of the, you know, or answer questions that's directed to me. And if I've got questions to ask, I'll just ask them anyway. And I remember the very first time I thought, right, I'm going to stand my ground, I'm going to do it. Oh, my heart was beating so fast. I was so scared, and I had no reason to be scared, but I was. And then I kind of got over that up, and then it's just gone easier and easier and easier and easier. I'm not going to say it's completely easy, but it is getting a lot better. And I know that, you know, even if I might be or have been the only female engineer in the room, in the next couple of years, it's going to be you know, slightly different, because there'll be maybe 2 engineers, female engineers, and then 3, and then 4, and then it will get better. But yeah, I think definitely a lot of it has to do with being a woman.
So, Anita, what do you think? I mean, you've been studying. You've done one placement, but you've been studying. So tell us about what it's like at university, being probably, I don't know, I assume that there are far fewer women at UCL than there are men. So what's that like?
Well, already in South Bank, we were, I think when the whole class was together, full-time and part-timers, probably 1/10 of the class. But it's okay. Like, I always believe that even when there is self-doubt, if you know what you're talking about, then there is no issue. I had that kind of issue one time in a work placement where I felt like subcontractors weren't getting really serious about what I was doing, because I was a young female, 21 years old, inside, wearing a suit with side boots. So obviously, while they were working, they were a bit looking like, who is this girl? But eventually it will work out if you know what you're doing, and you know, you keep your boundaries and you show that you're there to do your work. They will understand.
Good.
And
Good.
I feel personally it's also because when I was back in South Bank, I used to mentor. So I was involved as student ambassador in a few programs of mentorship. And I feel like for me personally, it's very important as well to be an example. So it's always been a matter of, if I don't do it, then other people that I'm trying to mentor will not do it either, because I'm not setting that example. So that is a big, important part of it for me as well.
That's interesting, because the woman that I mentioned at the beginning, Naomi McGregor, the two things she talked about in her TED talk was about the fear of failure and the fear of judgment. She found that quite crippling, and also the lack of role models. So that's really interesting that you said that. We've got a question from our very extensive audience. So I'll put it to everybody, although it's specific to you, Alida. So Alida, do you feel that you would have become an engineer without the initial support from your school in Italy? And do you feel that having the support or education at the beginning would have helped other females look into the industry? And I'm going to just stop there for a minute, because one of the things we've been looking at in our school, which is the built environment and architecture, is why women go into the construction industry. And although we're at the early stages of looking at it, one of the common features is that all the women who come into construction have discussed it with a significant man in their lives who suggested it. So their dad or their uncle or their someone, and said, yes, it's okay. And otherwise they'd never have known about construction. And Alida, you were talking about never really knowing about engineering. I'm just wondering if that's something that might be worth discussing.
Yes, and I understand. I understand having someone in the family that suggested it, but I would say that wasn't really the case for me. Like, I was immersed in it, and yet I didn't see it. My dad worked in construction, but he is a mechanical engineer. He just suggested to do something that would be fitting my skills, and he didn't really suggest one in particular. Obviously, at my initial idea of being a doctor, he was happy with that too. But it was just, I think, more the suggestion that I got from my teachers in high school. And when I went to the career fair, was pretty clear to me that I wanted to do something related to buildings and infrastructure, and something that stays throughout time and is visible to everyone, has an impact on everyone's life.
Great. Abby, what do you think about male influences encouraging you to do things that you perhaps wouldn't have thought about?
I think it's very interesting, and I actually I agree, because it was my dad that kind of pushed me into really thinking about a career in engineering. And I can understand that. I can definitely understand that, because engineering is still it's still perceived as a very male-dominated industry. And so when you have a male telling you, oh, you know, I do this, you could do this too, or I know someone that does this, I think you'd be good at it. It had some level of validation to your capability, or you know, of being a successful engineer. And I think it also helps more when non-engineering role models. So I think, you know, like you said about the woman in the TED talk talking about representation as well. And I feel like because there isn't as much representation for women in engineering, that's why it makes sense that a lot of men are, you know, a lot of women that are doing it are saying that it's been attributed to a man, you know, kind of edging them on, telling them, you know, you should do it, you can do it. But the more representation that we have with women in engineering, the less, you know, the less we'll have people saying, oh, it was a man that told me. It'll be more of a, I saw a woman doing it and I thought, oh, she could do it, I could do it too. And so it will kind of go hand in hand. But I definitely agree, because it was a man that kind of edged me on into doing it as well.
Interesting. Jasmine.
Forgive Waffles, by the way, otherwise he'll just be meowing at the door. So he's part of the panel conference as well. What was it? I didn't, gosh, with all of these things, I didn't grow up with an artist in the family. I didn't grow up with an engineer in the family. I kind of fell into it. But what was interesting, going back to what both of you were saying, is that working, because even now, you know, I'm in the technical workshops with the chaps, and when they see that you are desperate to learn and you are desperate to know, and you're quite happy to go, you know, I don't mind getting it wrong. What is it I need to know? There is this sort of this wonderful sort of respect that, you know, when you just keep on grafting and doing. I'm not saying that as a woman I don't have to graft 10 times harder than everybody else, but there is that appreciation. No, I didn't know any engineers in kind of growing up. I am in awe of them, and I'm not just saying that because I'm on this. I know when I have an idea, in order to turn it into something that is practical and real, it is an engineer that does that. And I'm always, you know, for example, with the sculpture going up, I had never really given it thought about, oh, this thing has to go on the wall and it has to stay up there and wind shear. And so I've learned a great deal about things like that. Sometimes I think there is a problem with nomenclature. So in other words, I think if we could change the word engineer to something else, I think it would not only be more attractive to women, but even male engineers would be much more greatly appreciated. I think, unfortunately, it's people have no concept of how difficult it is to become an engineer, and you know how academic and how hard it has to be. Yeah, again, with me, I guess it's one of the other things that snuck up on me, but it's almost paramount to anything that you want to create or make, even with fashion, for example. I'm forever saying to my students, don't forget, fashion is effectively engineering in fabric. If you look at almost anything you do, whether you make a cake or whatever it is being engineered. This thing has to have form and structure, and it has to stand up. And I think if we could actually explain to people, or even show them, it's a bit like the word creativity, it's the word engineering. If you actually show to people, actually engineering is pretty much in everything that we do, pretty much every day. Not only do I think it would cross genders a little bit more, because it's not, you know, it's not so out there. I just think engineers should be much more appreciated as well, not just simply female ones. I'm sorry, I'm waffling on, but you know what I'm trying to say.
I know what you're going to say. I was just thinking about, I remember somebody used to refer to housework as being domestic engineering, in a sort of jokey way. So yeah, because it is, isn't it? I was wondering about post-COVID and risk taking, and kind of just looking forward in a creative way, because that's what we're looking at today, choosing to challenge ourselves. If we look back at some of the biggest changes in history, not the huge ones that Jasmine was talking about at the beginning, but you know, the First World War, the Second World War. Perhaps the First World War was when we got change so that women could vote, or some women could vote initially, and women were able to become engineers. And the Second World War, we had again massive changes in social changes and the creation of the NHS. And I think it'd be great to think of some really positive COVID or post-COVID things that might happen or could happen, that would be something amazing to look forward to. I don't know, what do you think?
I agree. I think definitely. I think a lot of innovative ideas come in after crisis, because you're trying to look for ways to solve problem, and that's pretty much what engineering is all about. And I know that, you know, post-COVID, before COVID, a lot of people probably would not have thought about working from home as much as we had to, and we were forced to do it. I know, you know, during the first lockdown, actually, interestingly enough, during the first lockdown, I saw my first ever virtual fashion show ever. And this is something that a lot of people, you know, no one would have really thought would be needed, because who would want to sit down at home and watch a, you know, virtual fashion show? So, you know, it's thinking outside the box, and COVID and the restrictions of the lockdown it's got people thinking about other ways to do things that we have to do, but without having, as you know, without having the conventional method to do it. And you know, a lot of these things are stuff that would typically affect women in general. I mean, you think about women that are engineers, that are mothers, and pre-COVID, as a woman, you'd probably go to work, a child would go to school, and then that's it. But with COVID and people having to work from home, you've had to kind of think about how to mother and work in the same space. And that's, that's opened a different area of where people can bring themselves more to work than they did in the past. And and I think, there's so many more opportunities and ways that things are going to be so much more different than it was pre-COVID. And it's going to be different for the better.
Good. Alida, well, you're going to be graduating, coming out into this post-COVID world. What do you think is going to happen? What do you hope what is going to happen?
Well, a lot has changed already. In terms of academic courses, it's everything different, because we had to work, for example, in groups with people that are in other countries, America, China. We have to agree on timings to do group work together. Never met those people face to face. So definitely it's a different experience, but it's teaching us a lot about how much we can do even from our homes. And in terms of my field, actually, it's just bringing more and more innovation, because construction is the first, it wasn't fully affected by COVID, because construction is one of the few fields where we already have masks and goggles inside, so that is not affected, and everyone works on a distance. So construction didn't really stop at any point. But in terms of designing and project management, a lot has been changed, and we need to find new technologies on how to work together. I had the graduate positions from April until November, and we had to have loads of meetings through Zoom, try to work on models throughout programs that allow sharing of work, because it's quite difficult to send back and forth very heavy models, for example, and it's easier to actually implement different types of softwares where we can work together at the same time on the same model. So that has been, I think, quite good coming out of COVID rather than bad from this pandemic.
So working internationally and more collaborative working and creativity.
Yes, we had to be creative, look for new softwares out there that could facilitate our work.
Yasmin.
I'm loving the creativity word. Yeah, it's everywhere. The last year, I know that it's been tough in many ways, but it's the thing about innovation. I think any type of change or transformation is, I used to think that the idea was everything. I used to think that if the idea was good enough, people, but build it and they will come. It's not true. It's the timing. I've now learned that timing is everything. And certainly for me, before COVID, before people, when they were so busy rushing from here to there, they weren't engaging with their natural environment. So the last year it's been huge for me, because all of a sudden people are prepared to listen. They actually have had time to stop and smell the roses. And the other thing that I've learned from some of the work that I've done with Engineers Without Borders is that the less stuff we have, the more creative we become. Because let's face it, if we have an unlimited budget, it really doesn't matter what you do. You can create pretty much anything. But the measure of what you're doing is the less you have, what can you do with it? And I'm hoping what will happen is that the environmental message, and in construction, for example, I know the UK is one of the best at recycling concrete. I know that we're actually very good at that, but if you think of the effect that concrete has on global warming, but I'm hoping that we will start to look at things and realize that the things that gave us pleasure and gave us joy were not what we consumed during the pandemic, but what we created or how we interacted together. So that for me is very promising, and I'm sure people will create what they're asked to create. So if we get a movement from people, if we and we have a lot more corporations now that are becoming a lot more aware of their corporate social responsibility. So yeah, I'm the utopian idealist, but I am hoping that it's going to lead us to, to a much better future.
Great. We've got a question from one of our members of the audience. So, ladies, how can women who are established in STEM careers support those women who are just starting their STEM careers? So, how can we help? How can we help each other? So, Abby, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think I guess we can help each other by putting ourselves out there. So if we put ourselves out there, we increase representation. And when we increase representation in engineering, intentionally or intentionally, you are potentially inspiring somebody. So someone's going to see you or your presentation, or any material you kind of put out there and say, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I want to be that person. I think another way is to mentor. If you know people, if you know young girls that are still young, you're not quite sure what they'd like to do, or maybe they think they know what they'd like to do, and you can kind of just say, well, you want to be a fashion designer. I think Yasmin mentioned that earlier. You could go into engineering and be a materials engineer, and then because in that case you'll have a lot to do with fabrics or paints and stuff like that. Or you know a young girl that really likes makeup. Who doesn't like makeup? Someone that really likes makeup. Oh yeah, you could definitely go into chemical engineering, because this makeup you're using, someone's created it in a really big pot, and that pot took an engineer to design the concept, to design how you take it from a lab scale to the industrial scale, and there's engineering involved in that. Or someone that a young girl that likes Lego and likes building things, and well, you can go into construction. You can be a structural engineer or a civil engineer. So yeah, just going out of our way to mentor people or putting ourselves out there. And that way more people can take from, can learn about what you're doing, and also maybe come into contact with you and ask you for help. Yeah.
Okay. So Elida, I know you've already, you talked already about doing some mentoring. Do you think it's reasonable that women should do all these things that we're doing? So we're, Jasmine's looking after family and career and art and engineering and the cat and also mentoring. It seems like an awful lot. We're giving ourselves too much to do. What do we think, Elita?
I think it's never too much. As much, if we have a passion for it, then it is not too much. There is not such thing as too much for following our passions. And in terms of to inspire more young girls, yeah, I agree with Abby. I think there is needed more mentorship and more awareness. Just even have more conversation, even with our families and relatives. You never know, our aunt may talk to other people in, I don't know, with her daughter's peers or whoever. Is just introducing the idea that we can be in engineering, and the fact that also engineering is so wide, because even just civil engineering is so wide. So you can't even imagine how many types of engineering there are out there. So there is something for anyone that is looking to create something. It just needs to be shown that is a possibility, and that other people's doubts shouldn't be just, shut down. Just to an encouragement, I think, to look forward than just the doubts of other people. Just look further and research more and see if actually that fits your passion.
Okay. Jasmine, what do you think? Have you got any more time?
No, I've got three answers to this. The first one, and one I learned the hard way, and again, it's probably because I'm a little bit older. Networking. I hate that word, but you know what I mean. It is of paramount importance, especially for women. As soon as I started meeting, the women who were in my tribe, who were interested in, and vice versa, people who didn't do anything like what I did, we opened doors for each other. And I cannot stress that enough. It is about opening doors, not with an agenda, not with the hope that you will get anything in return, but having enough people in your network that when you meet other people, you go, oh, I know who you should meet. Oh, I know who you should speak to. Oh, I know. And that's huge. And I think certainly for my generation of women, whether it was because we were at home or we were with kids or whatever, we didn't network. And I think that was the difference between women and men. Men networked over a pint or over, I know I'm probably being very stereotypical, but on the whole, that was where deals were made. That's where jobs were offered. So I think networking really, really important, and not with an agenda, not with any hope that you will get anything in return. I can't stress that enough. The second thing I wanted to add is it's not simply about new engineers or people learning to be good. There are a wealth of highly qualified female engineers out there who, for whatever reason, had to take a break. Invariably, it's family. We need to create a system where people can come back, right? They have got this wonderful education, they've got all these skills, but it is incredibly hard coming back, you know, where you might come back at a lower level, or systems have changed or whatever. We need to realize that that wealth of education is still as relevant. How do we create a system in which people can come back? Because again, I gave a very short talk up in London years ago, and it was to female engineers. And I was amazed. It was only like 2 minutes. I had a queue of women wanting to talk to me, and these were all, you know, women who were a little bit older, and they were all talking to me about all the creative things that they were doing. But how do I get back into? So I was stunned. I was really, really stunned at that. And of course, with younger women, it's role models, but it's also, if you think about degrees, they are becoming less and less about one particular subject. They are becoming so much more cross-curricular. And I can guarantee that, yes, if you're interested in fashion, there is probably some sort of degree somewhere which crosses over, or engineering and sustainability, or so you don't have to be siloed. This is what I'm trying to say. If there is more than one thing that interests you, there is probably a course. And if there isn't a course, demand it. Because that, you know, when I talked about the conceptual age, that's what it's going to be about. Constant learning, constant reinvention, finding links between things that we hadn't found links between, you know, before. So I think it's a much bigger shift. Sorry, I'll stop talking now, but that's what I want to say.
You said there was 3, you promised us 3 things. I only counted 2.
Oh no, I said the networking. I said reinvention of already established engineers.
Yeah.
And then, okay.
What can so you ladies all experienced education at London South Bank University, and then you all went off to UCL for some very strange reason and didn't stay with us for your postgraduate courses. So what could LSBU do differently or better? What would have made things different or easier, or I don't know, more positive for you? So Abby, we'll start with you.
I had a very good experience for my undergrad at South Bank, because I was able to not just study, I was able to work as well. I was able to volunteer for the Big Bang. I had so many opportunities at South Bank. So I think that's something that South Bank did really, really well. One thing that I would have said that they could have done better would have been to offer a master's degree, but they do that now in chemical engineering. But I think you know, South Bank is very vocational. Well, it was started off as a polytechnic, very vocational. And I know that in my course we learned about the theories of engineering, but we also did quite practical modules as well, which I think is amazing, because at the end of the day, there's thousands of students that study engineering, and you know, when you then graduate and go into the workforce, it's what sets you apart. And I think South Bank did something, you know, something that I probably wouldn't have had that same opportunity in another university, in the sense of I was able to develop my interpersonal skills, my communication skills outside of my degree. You know, I was president of the Chemical Engineering Society. I volunteered for a different, you know, a number of opportunities and initiatives. And I think that that's something that, you know, South Bank should continue to do and never stop. Hopefully they won't stop. One thing that they could probably do better would be, I guess, help students get more placement opportunities in engineering. So engineering students get more placement opportunities, because I know that that was something that I struggled with, but I did it. I think I was like the only one in my course that did the placement year.
And you found that really valuable. Brilliant. Okay, Elisa, what do you think?
To be honest, I am not too sure, because I actually had some doubts at my first month at UCL. I wanted to go back to South Bank. So I am very happy of my studies there. I think maybe I would agree with Abby with the opportunities. I had actually occasion to have a placement, but that was, I would say I'm more thankful to the academics rather than the full-on system, because I was introduced by my academics, but it was quite confusing to which kind of process I needed to follow to get to a placement. I think, yeah, on that I agree with Abby, but again, academics on their own have a lot of initiatives. So in that sense, for me, it worked. I ended up doing a 2 months placement in a structural steel company. There was a lot of help from our academics in civil engineering. So in those terms, I think that's the only thing, because I really enjoyed my experience there. I don't think there is anything else that I would say needs more improvement.
Well, it's very nice to hear. Right, Jasmine, what do you think?
Loved South Bank, as I said right at the beginning. It gives opportunities to people who haven't always followed the path the way that I didn't when I first kind of dropped out of school. One of the things I think South Bank can do better is we have doing some amazing sort of projects, but they're not bigged up enough. They're not marketed enough. They're not heard about enough. And this is something I have been speaking to people about, because I think students need to know that if you come to South Bank and you're going to be doing some incredible things, whereas some of the other sort of more red brick universities are much better at that. They're much better at marketing themselves. I went to UCL because I could get to do the PhD that I was interested in doing. It was much more physics based, and obviously we don't really do physics at South Bank as such. But yeah, that's the only thing. And I think, again, in terms of getting more sponsorship or more placements, as much as I hate to say it, we need to, if we're doing cool things, which we are, people need to know about it more. So that's one thing I would ask of South Bank. And I know that there is a big movement to do it. Talks like this, discussions like this, very important, because people go, they're doing cutting edge stuff, because we're doing it, but I don't always think that people know about it. So I think that's really important. But certainly in terms of, you couldn't go to a more diverse place. I have a great deal of affection, which is why I keep coming back. I never leave. I keep coming back because I love the people there. It's just, it couldn't be a more diverse place, which is one of the things. And obviously I keep talking about divergent thinking, so it's one of my favorite places. Excellent,
good. So there's any more questions from our extensive audience? You've got just a couple of minutes to send those through. If not, shall I put you on the spot, ladies, and ask you to I don't know, give me 3 words about what's the best thing about women in engineering, or 5 words, or a few words. So what's the best thing about engineering? What would you say to inspire young women to go into engineering?
You could do it. I think that would be my 3. Well, not 3 words, but however much words. You can do it. 4 words. You can do it, because they can. And sometimes they don't think they can, and they don't see themselves doing it. But I assure you, they can do it. So that would be my little motto.
That's great. Motto is great. So, Alida, have you got a motto? Have you got a couple of words you could say?
I am not sure about a motto, but I would say that the way women think is quite different to the way that men think. And I've seen in my short experiences that is very appreciated. When it comes to projects, the attention to detail that women can give, and sometimes even the creativity or the patience with some clients is very, very appreciated. So in this sense, I don't have a motto, but it's kind of like Abby saying, you can do it, but sometimes you can even do it better.
I've just been told that I've missed a question. So Jasmine, I'm going to ask you to deal with the question before you give us your motto. So we choose to challenge your mind within the engineering industry. Should there be more awareness from companies to encourage females or women into the industry? Do you think companies have an obligation to encourage women?
Of course they do. And again, talks like this, you know, we need to ask and not demand. We need to ask for those particular things. So yes, of course they do. But again, there is this issue, I think, and it's not at the beginning. Although we don't have as many women as young women as young men going into engineering. There is an issue with losing engineers later on, and I think that's really quite fundamental. How that, I think, is something that really needs to be addressed. But yeah.
Okay, great. And sorry.
I was just literally going to just add to what Jasmine said about that, and I think definitely a lot of companies they do have that obligation to market engineering to younger people, more so because statistics shows that a more diverse workforce, it means more money. So there's no reason why they shouldn't do it. They've got more reasons to do it than not to do it.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think we're about coming to an end. So so our words of wisdom, ladies, that just in summary, so our takeaways are that post-COVID, there's lots of other creative ways for us to do things and challenge things, and engineering is at the heart of what we do. Again, post-COVID, working internationally and collaboratively is where we're going to see effective change. I really like Jasmine's point about timing is everything, and that COVID has given us an opportunity to listen. So perhaps people are listening to some of the things that we're saying tonight. We talked about the importance of mentoring, role models, and women networking in a way that they haven't perhaps before. And that we need to deal with welcoming back women after career breaks for caring and other responsibilities. I really like something that I can't remember which one of you said it earlier, but about don't mind getting things wrong. And I think that's it's not the imposter syndrome, but it's something else that I think women sometimes blame themselves if they get something wrong, and they find that quite crippling, in a way that actually it's not crippling. It's just about learning, isn't it? It's about learning and moving forward. And then finally, which is the biggest challenge, is we need a new word for engineering. So so if we could all come up with that in the next 100 years, that'd be great. Okay, well, thank you very much to all of our panelists and everyone for coming along this evening. And there are some more sessions planned as part of the series of 100 years since women in engineering have been trained at London South Bank University. I think Dean's going to put in the chat the links to the YouTube channel and some other information. So, ladies, thank you very much for being part of our panel this evening. Should we give ourselves a round of applause? There you go.
Thank you, and Maggie, thank you very much, and Abby and Aled. It was really nice to be up here. Thank you, and Dean. Sorry, and Dean.
And Dean. There we go. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.